Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma. I'm here. I'm flying solo all by myself because, you know what, my brothers from my other mothers, they're a little busy, but we're going to reconvene and get together, and we got some different things to talk about heading into what I hope is the official beginning of summer, right? Memorial Day weekend, so enjoy all the water parks and pools and everything else that are beginning to open up. I know that I am. I'm looking forward to it. It's just, right now, I got some things to get off my chest. Maybe it's just because I woke up in a mood, because also being a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, for those of you who also follow hockey, I know this isn't a hockey podcast, so I'm not going to get too long-winded here, but man, I woke up in a bad mood or on the wrong side of the bed or whatever with the Pens losing that game to the Islanders, and just the way it ended up going down in a double overtime. So those of yins that are, you know, from the Steel City, transplants or otherwise, also Penguins fans, I think you feel my pain, but it's been very painful, and I had a feeling if I bring Zach or Brian or Noah or Terry or anybody else on this show besides myself here, I get accused sometimes of talking too much, and I'll take a couple pauses because I do need some coffee to go along with this, because I feel drained, man. I can't tell you how much these off-season storylines are annoying me, and there's several here that actually we're going to expound upon a bit more. One in particular later this week, hopefully, myself and Zach have a particular axe to grind with a member of the NFL media. I can't believe Brian doesn't like coffee. But until then, and I apologize, hopefully I'm not slurping into the microphone. As most of you have followed this show before, there's some newbies here that are already ready to shut this off. They're like, what is this clown doing? But just bear with me here. You know what I mean? It's all part of the show. It's all fun and games. It's all, you know what, and giggles. But the NFL, we're heading into June. We know there's really nothing that's going on or going to transpire from the Super Bowl on, pretty much from the end of the season on, unless your team's in the playoffs. Now, you may watch some of the other games that are going on around the league, and you get to the Super Bowl, and everybody has a party, and even people who don't watch football are watching the Super Bowl, maybe just for commercials or whatever, and it's fun. And then all of a sudden, boom, it just falls flat, it dies. We had some spring football. In fact, there's something going on, this TSL league on Fox. I didn't even know it existed. That's pretty bad for me, because, you know, I seek out things like the Alliance of American Football or the XFL, and even my alma mater winning one game with the FCS college ranks playing in the spring here. It's been a unique experience having some spring football, especially when you mix that in with the hockey season. Usually it's like hockey doesn't really start for me, and I know it's been lopsided with the whole pandemic stuff and the way they've rescheduled everything, but for me, hockey season doesn't start until football is over, and football just didn't really end this year. But it's not like, you know, I get it. You're glued to the Pittsburgh Steelers stuff, right? You're glued to actual NFL news. So that's why the draft is such a big thing. That's why free agency is such a big thing. And now we don't have anything until like maybe the middle of July. I'm trying to think when the Steelers kicked this thing off. St. Vincent's College, they were talking about returning to for training camp this season. They had said this before last season. I had heard no change in plans. Obviously, due to all of the COVID restrictions last year, they had moved things to Heinz Field. It was a much different regimen and a much different process. So if we get back to basics here, and hopefully fans at St. Vincent's, which, you know, I very much look forward to going to. The very first day of training camp is a big one for me, and then also Friday Night Lights, also a big one. So hopefully we can get both of these things back to normal, and, you know, until we hear something otherwise. What else do we have to talk about? Well, some people want to talk about some of these things, like I said, or maybe I haven't said it yet, but they're going to necessitate an entire podcast all of their own if I get too long-winded here, which is probably better that one of my other brothers here, or sisters for that matter, aren't joining me today. I don't know where to begin. I peruse things on the internet. I have the TV on sometimes in the background, NFL Network or ESPN or whatever be the sports talk flavor of the day. And I just see some of these storylines. And one of the biggest ones is, it's not even like in particular a storyline. It's anytime I go on Facebook, lots of Steelers groups I belong to. I may interact with some of the here or there on there too. And hello, if I do. Sometimes time permits that. My own Twitter account, Instagram, a little less frequently. I only have so much time for some of these things. Then, of course, the folks here in the YouTube comments, of which I got quite a few that I still need to go through and respond to. But a lot of people just kind of feel, well, nothing's really going to change if Mike Tomlin is the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's just like, what? We still got people that are like stuck on, oh, you inherited Cowher's team, as if Cowher didn't inherit Chuck Noll players, future Hall of Famers like Dermontti Dawson or Rod Woodson or franchise great like Greg Lloyd. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to kind of carry that over still when we're in 2021. And most of the even armchair quarterbacks here, of which I've been accused of, people are like, hey, you're biased. There's a comment I'm seeing right here on YouTube. Your fandom is shining bright. My fandom always shines bright, brother. You can't see, like, around here. I mean, come on now. If you tune into a Pittsburgh Steelers show and want to hear something better about another team, it's not going to happen because of the reason from Cowher through Tomlin. No losing seasons. A couple of 8-8, some playoff opportunities missed here or there. Maybe higher expectations that haven't been fulfilled. I get all that. I get some of the disappointment. But when we get other fans to jump in on here, Ravens fans, you kind of have some room to talk. I allow a little more leeway. I have given some mad respect to John Harbaugh on this show. I said John Harbaugh is like Bill Cowher in very many ways. I know it makes you puke to say that because you don't like things that are black and purple. Okay, I get it. They're a rival. You're not supposed to give anybody else props, but I'm not going to give props to people like Cleveland Browns fans that are trying to rag on the Steelers, and especially not Bengals fans. Talk to me, when you guys win some actual playoff games. Yeah, I get it. Browns won one playoff game. That's one. Come on, let's see some more from you guys. Still didn't win the division. Steelers, this is where I was going with the Mike Tomlin thing, by the way. Steelers start 11-0. Everyone talks Mike Tomlin, head coach of the year. Steelers the previous year lose Ben Roethlisberger. Look like they're completely out of it. 0-3 until they beat the Bengals in week 4. Mason Rudolph under center. All of a sudden, the Steelers are in playoff contention up to where they move a Sunday night football game between the Steelers and Buffalo Bills. Well, they move it to a Sunday night game. They flex it because that was a huge game with major playoff implications. Unfortunately, Duck Hodges, the Cinderella story, turned into a pumpkin. I hate saying that. You love the player, you love the opportunity, you love the story, but the truth be told here, see, look, this isn't my fandom coming through saying Duck Hodges should be the starting quarterback and the 10-year starter for the Steelers. This is where you would start to be a little less biased and say, hey, this team's getting buried 6 feet under sometime. And I'm going to talk about that with Ben, too, because people really think that, oh, he's over the hill and everything like that, which is preposterous. But the thing is coaching got them to that point. Mike Tomlin is the head coach, the leader. Keith Butler, his defense, the most sacks. Like, there's not anybody close, and they hold the all-time record for games with the sack. They've led the league like or at least a tie for the league lead the last 4 straight seasons. There's no reason for me to believe that any of this changes, and it all spells trouble for the other teams of the AFC North. Have those other teams improved from where they were? I mean, the Bengals had the top overall pick. Let's not forget that. That's why they got Joe Burrow. They were the worst team in the NFL. The Cleveland Browns have been the worst team in the NFL multiple times over the last few seasons. But the Baltimore Ravens I give more respect to because they've won Super Bowls competing with the Steelers in their same division. Well, the Steelers have done the same, and they've traded some division crowns. And the Bengals somewhere in the mix back when they had Marvin Lewis and the Red Rifle and A.J. Green and all that going on. They won some division championships there as well. They were competitive sometimes. They had Carson Palmer and T.O. and Ocho Cinco and things like that. But the Cleveland Browns, you got to have a more level of consistency. Are you getting there? Perhaps. But our own fans tend to think that things need to be like a Cleveland Browns or a Cincinnati Bengals, where maybe even the Ravens, but the Ravens had to move on. Joe Flacco had a contract that just was suffocating that team, but his performance wasn't the same on the field, and he also wasn't available. He had those back injuries. I get the concern. You try and link that the same way with Big Ben Roethlisberger. It's not the same thing. You try and keep the same structure, the same foundation. General manager, they did that with Ozzie Newsome, now over to, what's his name, Podesta, I think. And then John Harbaugh still is the head coach. We thought maybe he was on the hot seat for a little while. Cincinnati Bengals, they had to can Marvin Lewis. We don't know if Zach Taylor is the next greatest thing next to sliced bread. The Cleveland Browns, it changing coaches like they changed their underwear. They're finally going to have the same guy for 2 years in a row. I mean, I guess Hugh Jackson counts, but for what? One in, January 31st is not Marvin Lewis Day. Almost could be, too. Hugh Jackson Day, because he went 1-31 as the Browns head coach, an 0-16 flop of a season. You got nowhere to look but up. I understand that people get excited about this type of stuff, but it's not reason or cause to kick your head coach, who's been great, out the window. You know what I mean? This guy is putting up, Mike Tomlin that is putting up statistics and records in a job that is very volatile, sees a lot of turnover, and he's being in the same category as guys like Don Shula, John Madden. I digress on saying like Joe Gibbs and Bill Parcells only because they have more hardware, but you look at their regular season, and this is where everybody's going to be like, well, you got to do something else. Well, the Chargers haven't been quite the same since they got rid of Marty Schottenheimer. They canned him. They had LaDainian Tomlinson. They had Phillip Rivers. They had all that in place, and that team has just been a dumpster fire pretty much ever since. Just real erratic. You could take a look at what a lot of the other teams, not named the New England Patriots, have done over the last decade and a half, and you could probably see why the Steelers and our fans and people like myself have a lot more optimism. And for the most part, I mean, I see the same thing going on. I was talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins. I see the same people are talking about Sully, Mike Sullivan, their head coach. And they're talking about even getting rid of Geno, Evgeny Malkin, one of the greatest players. If it wasn't for Sidney Crosby also being on the Pens, these are two of the greatest players in NHL history, not just franchise history, okay? And I just think it's a fan thing. It's just I don't know. Do you get as upset? Like, I was upset this morning, but I don't think people should be fired from their job necessarily. There are some guys, Randy Fichtner, offensive coordinator, not a great job, not a great body of work, 2018, 2019, and 2020. You look at the way all of that went down. Some of that coincides with losing players like Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell. The Steelers still keep it going. They won the division. They almost made the playoffs without Ben Roethlisberger. Maybe they should have. All depends. What happens if Mason Rudolph doesn't get knocked out of that one game? What if he doesn't, maybe he never gets benched and Duck Hodges doesn't take the reins again, and then he's the guy throwing picks and getting sacked and everything like that. So it's it was a disappointing end to the last couple seasons, but there's other extenuating circumstances to that. You have the 3-game losses. The Duck Hodges is the starter, in that 2019 season. They fall out and end up 8-8, missing the playoffs just narrowly. Maybe still in it. I'd have to go back and look at the records. Maybe still in it. They may have been the next team if you had the expanded playoffs that you had last year, but the Steelers didn't need that. They said, screw that. We're kicking the door down. Unfortunately, they had to play 13 straight regular season games and then a 14th straight with the wild card. They sat some guys. They make some mistakes in the first quarter. Cleveland sits on that lead. It most definitely, if you want to talk about being unbiased or you want to talk about fandom or anything like that, I love this because I have another commenter here that said the Steelers get no respect. I can't wait to see our team kick their ... and shut them up. Can we start the season yet? I know. Inject it into my veins, right? Because it's exactly what I'm talking about here. This is a deal where the Steelers aren't getting any respect. The Browns-Steelers wildcard game completely changes the script. What do the Browns have to do besides run the ball and eat some clock when they're already spotted 21, 28 points, right? I get that some players make some mistakes. This isn't necessarily a Mike Tomlin thing and not having guys prepared. He can't control that Ben Roethlisberger throws a few picks. And that's kind of like where I'm at. In a lot of these cases, people are talking about Ben Roethlisberger's finished. Ben Roethlisberger isn't finished. This guy was supposed to be finished last year when he came back from that elbow injury. He was supposed to be finished the year before in 2019. 2018, it's like, get him off the radio in his radio show. It's always something with Ben Roethlisberger. He is the problem. He has too big of a contract. Let's go sign Aaron Rodgers. Oh, yeah, that's the perfect scenario. Let me tell you, folks, if you're complaining about Ben Roethlisberger and you're talking about him being old, what is he, 38 now? Let me pull this up just so I have his proper age, because there's only a year or two of difference. He's 39, so he's the same age as me. I hate admitting that, by the way. We just keep getting older, keep catching up to Brian. Aaron Rodgers is 37, 38, 37, so he'll be 38 in December. Ben just turned 39 in March 2nd, 1982. There's a year and a half difference between them. Aaron Rodgers is already threatening retirement. He's talking so much smack and trying to get his way with that organization. He got them to fire the head coaches. They get to the NFC Championship 2 years in a row. You're going to say, okay, yeah, that's much better than what the Steelers have done. They've actually won some playoff games. It's still disappointment, and most people will put the benchmark at you didn't win the Super Bowl. And if you don't win the Super Bowl, then that season is a failure. So you lose 2 conference championships. You forget about the 7-9 and 6-9 seasons with Mike McCarthy still there. He gets fired midway through the year. He was there for like over a decade and had quite a bit of success. Lost some conference championships, lost some playoff games, won the one Super Bowl. They had lost like 4 conference championships. Kind of reminds you of Bill Cowher. It always makes me wonder what would have happened if there was social media when Bill Cowher was the head coach. That gives you some time to pause and reflect on that, because you probably see it just as bad or worse in most cases as to some of the things I'm talking about here. But Aaron Rodgers gets them to change everything around. Okay, yeah, they had those failures of seasons. I get it. Rodgers was also hurt during that period of time. They go 13-3. But then Rodgers couldn't seal the deal. He had all those opportunities. They get the ball. It comes down to like this ticky-tack penalty, to be completely honest, and that's how Tampa Bay moves on. And that kind of sucks, but they didn't take advantage. They didn't take care of what they could have taken care of too. And that just is a game of football. And that's the same thing which happened with the Steelers. They didn't take care of it. They didn't take care of the ball. You had a bad snap of Pouncey. Pouncey probably felt so bad about that it forced him into retirement. I wholeheartedly believe if that doesn't happen in that game, he's still back playing this year. And we'll talk a little bit about the offensive line as well, because that's another thing that comes up. In fact, I might jump to it, but I kind of wanted to say a little bit more about my guy, Ben Roethlisberger. Big Ben, last season, he comes back from an elbow injury. Everybody had already put him 6 feet under, right? So 2019, it's not even worth discussing. He threw 1 pick. He didn't even throw a touchdown pass in 6 quarters of football. The previous year, and probably the reason why his arm was ready to fall off, was the 675 passes, by far the most he had thrown in a season. He had 608 in 2014. And he played all 16 games in both of these seasons. 5,129 yards. He threw 34 touchdowns but 16 interceptions. The 16 interceptions led the NFL, but that statistic itself were the fewest interceptions to ever lead the league. So, in other words, even though he led the league with 16, 16 was the lowest number that's ever been the most. You know what I mean? And that's for 16 games, too. Others may have thrown more if they played some more. I always look at Jared Goff as another guy that's kind of like that. You get to 2020, and Ben throws almost as many touchdowns in one fewer game, 33, but only throws 10 interceptions. But he doesn't throw anywhere near the same amount of yards. It makes you wonder what the heck happened here. Randy Fichtner, what happened here? It's not as if you didn't have like some of the same players. You still didn't have Lev Bell in 2018. Ben still had his favorite target. And remember, everybody's like, oh, he's just forcing it to AB. Juju's the shiny toy, all this and that. 2019 was the season of dink and dunk. Then last year, it's the same thing. He isn't getting downfield. Is the offensive line good enough? Did it give him enough time? Did they have any variety in play calling? We've talked about this on the show so many times. You give Ben a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit, something different, which we're going to get. This is going to be Matt Canada now as the offensive coordinator, promoted from the quarterback's coach. How much input did he have last year? We're about to find out this year to see if anything changes. But being the worst rushing team in the NFL, especially after they run they have 6 games here, right, the Steelers, to start the season, where you never thought they had a bad running game. It's just the variety of play calling just went out the window. They ran for 141 against the Giants, 109 against the Broncos, 169 against the Texans, then have this bye week that they're not even told. I just did this on the website. I do these little flashback articles every week. You kind of look back at this, like a season recall, right? I think that's what we title it over here on the website. It's stillcityunderground.com. But pointing out that in week 4, the Steelers still practiced on that Thursday. They didn't have any official news that the game was going to be postponed or even till when. I believe it was Friday morning, or was it Thursday morning? It was one or the other. Oh, no, afternoon, actually. It was like 12:30 in the afternoon or something like that, where it was officially said it would be moved, and they were doing all this shuffling. And initially, they gave the Ravens and Steelers the week off after they play each other, which is kind of important with the way how physical those games are between those two teams. See, there's some more. I'm giving a little bit more props to the Ravens, right? All the AFC North games are physical. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. All divisional games, those opponents get to know each other very well. Usually, unless you have teams with like a lot of large turnover, like let's say the Jacksonville Jaguars, a lot of those guys don't have a rivalry or anything built up yet. And quite frankly, the Bengals, maybe not as much yet, because there's a lot of turnover there. There's a lot of guys who haven't been there long enough to have played the Steelers, Browns, or Ravens. But the Ravens players have been there a while, and now the Browns players have been there for a minute, and you're starting to get a little bit of bad blood, right? So this games get physical, but the whole point being the Steelers had to go on the road and play the Titans instead of having playing the Ravens and then having a week off in Week 8. So that game gets slid back. They go on the road again and have to play the Ravens, then go on the road again and play the Cowboys. And you see how bad that Cowboys game is. You go back into it. That was a result of the physicality that they had against the Ravens. And the Steelers aren't having problems really on offense putting up points, right? 26, 26, 28, 38, 38, 27, 28. You get to the Cowboys, it's 24. The Bengals, 36. They play the Jaguars once again on the road. So they're on the road 4 out of 5 games here during this stretch. No break, no buys. Their bye week wasn't even a bye week because they still practiced. And somehow it's on Mike Tomlin. Somehow it's on Ben Roethlisberger. Yeah, the run game still kind of started to wimp out here. 136 on the Eagles, 129 on the Browns, in a game where the Steelers controlled the clock and played. You just take the script from the other game and put it here. Baker Mayfield throws that pick to Minka Fitzpatrick right out the gate. It's almost like the same exact game, except you flip which team is doing what, right? 94 against the Titans, then it falls off a cliff. They don't run the ball enough. They don't run the ball effectively when they do it. 48, 46, 44. They got 106 against the Jaguars. The Jaguars game was a matter of game control, clock management, and getting some rest for some players, knowing that they had the Thanksgiving Thursday night game coming up that never ended up happening. So some of these guys didn't get their full workout in, so to speak, and then everything was sluggish by the time you come around to a Wednesday 3:40 kickoff and play the Ravens, 68 yards of rushing. They couldn't even run the ball. Washington football team, 21 yards, 47 against the Bills, 86 when they tried to renew or rejuvenate the offensive philosophy there by doing just silly, stupid things that we weren't seeing. 22 yards against the Colts because that ended up becoming a bit of a shootout. 85 against the Browns in that final week where Mason Rudolph was the starter. So those totals, there's a bunch there of very small games, and the storyline is that the Steelers, they're not just going to improve because they took a running back, Najee Harris. I don't know about that. You get the right guy that can break some tackles, stays healthy. He could also be deployed as a wide receiver. We used to say Le'Veon Bell was the wide receiver 2 on this team years ago. He wanted to get paid like a wide receiver. He wanted to reset the running back market. I think we have too much of a short memory with how some of this used to work. I understand different offensive coordinators. You went from Todd Haley to Randy Fichtner, now to Matt Canada. Still doesn't mean they're not going to use the running back in the pass game. They saw how successful it was before. So, part of this, is it offensive line woes too? Probably. I mean, I wasn't the biggest fan of Alejandro Villanueva's play last year at left tackle. I thought David DeCastro, for the games he did end up playing, he sat out some hurt. He was probably playing a little banged up. Let's see if he's healthy and back to his all-pro form as well. That would be a big boost to the Steelers. Marquise Pouncey as well. You don't know the level of play at which he was at. Matt Filer moved over from tackle, then over to guard, now out. So they shake some things up here. So a lot of people think that, well, Ben Roethlisberger's finished. Well, I already said this. I know I said this, but Ben Roethlisberger's not finished. In fact, if you give Ben Roethlisberger a little bit of help, which are all of these things that needed to be done, especially with the running game, you're not even calling running plays and expecting this guy. He's throwing the ball 49 times against the Colts, 38, 37, 53. Oh, my goodness. It's just so bad. I'm working backwards, but if you get to a point, Tennessee threw it 49 times, 32 against the Ravens, 42 against the Cowboys, 46 against the Bengals, 46 against the Jaguars, 51 and 53 against the Ravens and Washington football team. You're relying on this guy way too much. I get he doesn't have the yards, but he had the third most attempts in the league and the third most attempts with only 10 interceptions. You want Aaron Rodgers? I don't want Aaron Rodgers. He's a diva. He's a real pain in the ass. Compared to Ben took a pay cut. He had a big contract. Lots of quarterbacks do. I don't want to be paying Dak Prescott money right now for anybody. Patrick Mahomes money for anybody. That's where all of this is headed, man. At least Ben Roethlisberger has enough sense to say, I'll take a pay cut, about $5 million, come back this year. This team isn't necessarily in turmoil. I know a lot of people are thinking, oh, they should have drafted a quarterback instead of a running back. I don't think all their eggs are all in just one basket. Mason Rudolph gets a lot of flack. Mason Rudolph's teams were scoring more points per game than the 2020 Steelers were from that Wednesday Ravens game pretty much on. 19, 17, 15, 17. I mean, Mason Rudolph's in there. They're scoring in the 20s, at least 28, 27. They're getting there, and then the defense is limiting their opponents from getting crossing that 20 finish line. So that's the reason that works. He could be a game manager. Is also a guy that only had really one bad game with 4 picks in Thursday night game without Juju, James Conner, Deontay Johnson, a few other guys, and then gets slammed in the head with the helmet after he had already been concussed by Earl Thomas earlier in the year. Yeah, that could be some problems, but he came back in Week 17 last year, first quarterback since Tommy Maddox, not named Big Ben Roethlisberger, to throw for at least 300 yards in a game. It's at least promising. It's a small snippet. I don't know you put all your eggs in the basket, but I think you got a capable backup here just in case Ben becomes noodle-armed Peyton Manning, who still won a Super Bowl, because that was all defense, right? Because Peyton Manning's still a good player. Maybe you limit Ben a little bit, and you could hand the ball off to Najee Harris, and we'll see how this works. This worked for Ben the first time he won a Super Bowl, right? Handed off to Drum Bettis and Willie Parker. He was a rookie. They didn't allow him to make rookie mistakes. Well, throwing the ball up, you got more of a chance of losing it. Najee Harris loses, 700-some touches in college? He loses the ball just once? And you wonder why the guy was the first-round pick. I understand some people talk about second round and getting it there. Yeah, three running backs were gone by pick 33, 34, 35, something like that. There's only 32 teams, 32 picks in the first round, 3 running backs gone. He wasn't going to be there. Might as well take him now. Won't be there. It's about what you could do now, not what you could do later. You sit around and wait. They took action. I think Najee Harris is going to help this team a lot. He's going to help Ben a lot. And then you're going to have more of a balance. You don't even have to have a balance. It could still be 70-30, but you got to be able to run the football a little bit, right? I prefer it's not 70-30. It doesn't have to be 50-50 either. 60-40 is fine, especially in today's NFL. But hey, look at what Alvin Kamara did for Drew Brees, for example. Look what Aaron Jones does for Aaron Rodgers. This is what I'm seeing Najee Harris do for Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger, I don't feel, is any part of the problem. Let's also factor in, he hadn't actually played. This may have been from one of my YouTube commenters here too, and thank you for this. It's something that I didn't strongly enough consider, that he hadn't played with Deontay Johnson before last season. Eric Ebron was brand new, free agent pickup last season. Chase Claypool, rookie, brought in. The only guy he may have had some rapport with, and we already knew he was a little off the page with, was James Washington. So you think about that. Give him another year to kind of gel with some of these guys. Maybe you have a true offseason, a true training camp, and he's fully healed now. I don't know if he was rushed. He was ahead of schedule throwing tennis balls and stuff last year. So you got to consider that he still did all of this, and maybe he was hurting. And oh my God, the biggest thing here is the amount of passes that these guys dropped. I think Deontay Johnson's sure-handed enough. I don't think he's Dante Moncrief, which I still don't think Dante Moncrief was Dante Moncrief, but he jacked up his hand and busted up his fingers. It's kind of the Sammy Coates thing, too. Kiss of death. Got to have healthy hands to catch the football, right? Got to be on the field or lose your job, especially wide receivers. It's very volatile. Dime a dozen kind of. I hate saying a dime a dozen because you don't just find Chase Claypools anywhere, but you can find like a Ray McLeod very easily, right? So, at least those type of guys, right? Anyway, you take away some of these drops, move ahead, run the ball, not relying on having to catch the football a bunch of times. You cut like half of that out of there, those shenanigans. I think the offense will be a lot better. People still aren't sure, though, or aren't sold. Run game can't go anywhere but up, right? Running back is definitely not a wasted pick, but is the offensive line going to be good enough? Baltimore Ravens fans that I've been throwing some respect to, okay? Cleveland Browns, you got your bragging rights for now, right? Bengals, I don't know what you're doing right now. Wet my whistle here because I talked about this on a previous podcast. When you talk about the Steelers having no run game and a bad, poor offensive line, which still, Roethlisberger doesn't get sacked either, right? Let me see. He went down 13 times last year. 13. Man, ain't that something? And I was trying to see, I didn't have the defensive numbers. The defense was somewhere I'm not going to find it, am I? I wish sometimes when I scroll through these, 56, I knew it was in the 50s, didn't want to say the whole thing. Actually, Steelers offense in total only gave up 14. They had an extra sack there in that Week 17 game. I can't remember if that was technically Josh Dobbs on a scramble or if Rudolph actually went down too. But I'm not going to look that up because it's not that important. They're not getting sacked very often, not even once per game. Still kept Ben upright. So, a lot of that gets rid of the ball quick. I understand that too. But you got to be able to get the ball downfield. And it was fairly obvious when you're only running the ball coin flip 50-50 on first down, not really running it on second down, creating a hole for yourself on third down and having to throw it. Teams knew where the ball was going. And it was the whole jet motion thing. It was pretty obvious, too. That's been brought up also as one of the, tells if you're a poker player. You're giving it away. So a lot of these things are going to change with the coaching or the play calling. But the offensive line, Alejandro Villanueva, we really felt he had a really poor season. He's getting up there in age. And all of a sudden, Ravens fans are excited. They get rid of Orlando Brown. They have a hurt Ronnie Stanley. They're moving a guard over to a center. Sounds very similar to what's going on with Kendrick Green in Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh is the team that doesn't have the good offensive line, even though they went and signed Villanueva for like $14 million. Doesn't mean just because you gave him a lot of money that he instantly becomes a great player overnight again. You take one of our worst players, and the Chargers took Matt Fowler too, and you take these bad players and they sign contracts wherever else. Zach Banner had a chance to start last year. A lot of people are ragging on Chuks Okorafor. I know there's a lot of question marks, but you never know what these young men are capable of doing until you actually get them on the field and they do it. So, pump the brakes. Am I concerned about the tackles? Yeah, because you know what? I don't know. It's a question mark for me as much as each and every one of you watching or listening here. Absolutely. But I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt. I mean, it's not like the Steelers are a team that's just, if they felt tackle was that much more important, they probably wouldn't have drafted Najee Harris or Pat Freiermuth 1 and 2. And they still got a tackle. They still got a guy that they felt that they really liked with Dan Moore Jr. in the 4th round. It's much like the Kevin Dotson pick last year. And then you see how that ended up turning out. And he has a chance to start. And again, if you put DeCastro in there, B.J. Finney has been the starter before. We know how he can play. We know he's capable of playing. He could also play at guard. So the interior offensive line, I'm not really too concerned about. And really, how many times have we called Chuks Okorafor's name last year? I don't know that he was necessarily beaten like a drum. There's plays that happen because you're playing against other professional football players, other edge rushers. You see Myles Garrett twice a year in the AFC North. He's just as good as TJ Watt. Those two, they're going to be neck and neck until their careers are up. It's going to be the Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu argument all over again, okay? So when you see those type of things, 14 sacks given up by that offensive line. Do you think they get worse losing Villanueva and Filer and not able to run the ball and this, that, and the other thing? I don't think so. I don't think Ben's going to be a pinata. And I think they'll be able to run the ball and get 8 out of the box, hopefully. So it's another one of these dumb storylines. It's almost full encompassing around coaching, quarterback, run game, offensive line, protections, and everything else. And it's just driving me crazy because everyone's all over the place. You got to sign this guy. It's going to be another episode coming up, but Russell Kuhn and these other guys, they're sitting out there because either A, they want long-term contract, B, a lot of money, C, all of the above, D, assuredness that they're going to start or compete to be a starter or pencil it in as a starter. These boxes don't all check for the other 32 NFL teams, including the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's why they're still free agents, okay? The free agency period has come and gone. Steelers, could they make a move later on? Absolutely. Usually they're looking at other teams, other players that they have scouted that then get released at the end of training camp from those other rosters when you trim down to 53. So, speaking of which, there's a couple of others. I'm going to flip to the other side of the ball. And let's talk about Bud Dupree for a second. And Alex Highsmith had a very solid rookie season. I understand it's not the eye-popping, gigantic numbers that everyone would think. 2 sacks, 48 tackles combined, 30 of those solo. He had 5 tackles for a loss. He got to the quarterback 6 times. That was pretty much, I think his final 8 games, he kind of had, I would say maybe, I wanted to say 6 games, but Dupree did play 11. It was a 16-game schedule, so there's really only 5 games where Highsmith's the full-time starter. Dupree had 8 sacks. Dupree was on fire, but in those 11 games, Dupree has fewer tackles overall combined or solo, 7 fewer solo, 10 fewer assisted. He has 3 more tackles for loss, albeit playing twice as much as Highsmith, and the same thing with 15 quarterback hits. Let's give the young man a chance. I understand Dupree. I loved Bud Dupree. I was always a Bud Dupree defender. Big contract. That lights up the billboards and everything when you're watching on TV. And they say, how are they going to replace all this production? They had already planned to. I'm less concerned there. You're always concerned if there's an injury, right? And that's kind of where we're at with the cornerback situation. Because we still don't know who's going to be a replacement for Mike Hilton. They had a double whammy. They had to let Steven Nelson go. They brought Cameron Sutton back. But anybody that's been paying attention to Cam Sutton and what he has been doing, particularly even last year, as far as passer ratings, as far as pass deflections, creating splash plays, all of these things were on par or better than what Steven Nelson was doing. He's playing in different spots. He's playing on the outside, playing on the inside. Some very, very interesting stuff. I'm trying to see if I could dig up some of the research that I had already done. We'll see if I can find it. As always, Twitter is the barren wasteland here of trying to find old tweets. So one of the things that I like to bring up is Cam Sutton. There should be no drop-off from him and Steven Nelson, basically, without even rattling these stats off to you. That's the gist of the point. Joe Hayden, 32 years old, that could be concerning because then you have Justin Lane, who everyone felt was a steal, myself included, 3rd-round pick, developmental guy. Has he developed, or is his window of opportunity closed here? That's what we're going to find out. Usually when Justin Lane came on the field, they would slide Cam Sutton over to play in the slot, and they'd play Lane on the outside. So I don't know that there's an opportunity for him, or perhaps he just wasn't coached. There was maybe too much responsibility, still a young player, still raw, still green, whatever be the case, that they didn't have him play in that slot position. Maybe they didn't try him out there, but I'm still thinking he's a boundary corner. Will he ever be a starter? I don't think so. I don't think they bring Cam Sutton back and tell him he's going to compete for Steven Nelson's spot and then let Steven Nelson go once they let Steven Nelson know this news, without the intention of Sutton being that cornerback number 2 on the team. I think he'll be fine. I think there's a lot of disrespect with the Steelers secondary, especially when you have Minkah Fitzpatrick. People really overlook that. People really overlook Terrell Edmunds as well. He had a fine season last year. I'm never going to find these stats. I wish I could. I had the ones on Highsmith too. And it's really surprising if you do end up digging them up, because when you look at it, they're pretty much Sutton actually had better numbers than Nelson did. And I was a big Steven Nelson fan, but I don't want to beat the dead horse here on that. It's more or less what's going on too with everyone else that's in the division, particularly like the Cleveland Browns. So the Steelers will get Devin Bush back. They return pretty much everyone else. They're switching out one corner. They're switching out an edge rusher. And both of those guys, the corner and the edge rusher, being Highsmith and Sutton, both have starting experience. The Steelers do consider their nickel corner, their former Mike Hilton, a starter as well. So instead of 11 guys, they may announce 12 or even 13 as part of their pregame stuff, because they consider all of these guys starters, and it's because of playing a lot of nickel defense and a lot of different sub-packages. Case in point being, that is the one spot that you have some concern for, right? But it doesn't mean the rest of this defense isn't good. And especially since Highsmith started 5 games, got a lot of playing time last year. Sutton has been playing all over the place. They have a number of options that are there. I'll get into it deeper on another show, so I don't get too long-winded, even though I'm by myself. I'm not concerned with the Steelers' defense, but I do get really peeved when I hear, is there a better duo than Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney? It's like, okay, the guy was a former first overall pick, but he's been what? I know, 0 sacks last year, played half a season. His numbers were not even as good as Alex Highsmith's in most cases. The same type of stuff, quarterback hits, tackles for loss, actual sacks. Highsmith even gets an interception in a game. Can Clowney benefit playing on the Browns defense? Well, the Browns got rid of Larry Ogunjobi and Sheldon Richardson. Those were the other 2 guys. Those were the interior guys on that defensive line. They got some question marks too. So that could hinder their defensive ends. Garrett, Clowney, whatever. The linebackers, they drafted JOK. They still have Mac Wilson, Sione Takitaki. I just get a little, like, I saw one that says who has the best secondaries in the NFL, and it showed like 8 teams, so a quarter of the league. It doesn't have the Steelers listed there. It has Ravens. Ravens should be there. They've got all the corners out the wazoo with Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters. But what do the Browns have? Denzel Ward? Denzel Ward came on like fire as a rookie, and he's been kind of just status quo, kind of middle of the pack guy since then, when healthy. Greedy Williams, someone that we wanted the Steelers to draft out of LSU, has not really had an NFL career. He has not really shown up. He may be a bust. They drafted Greg Newsome. You heard us on the last show. Zach likes him. I don't hate the pick. I think where a lot of people get confused is they see this shirt and this hat on me and all this paraphernalia. I try and balance it down. There's still, we don't know until these guys get on the field. I think that's where there's a lot of hesitation even with Steelers fans themselves. Najee Harris, got to see him play. I don't disagree with that whatsoever. Thing is, it's not Greg Newsome wasn't the top of his class either. So when I talk about Najee Harris, we're talking about the guy that was the dude. He is the man out of all the running backs coming out of college, playing for Alabama, national champions. Greg Newsome, hey, he's got some accolades. He could be a dude too. Let's see how it plays out. But I'm not going to crown immediately the Cleveland Browns one of the best secondaries. They signed John Johnson. No, that's great. Grant Delpit, pretty much going to be his rookie year as well because he was hurt a lot last season. They're still trying to figure it out. They had Carl Joseph there. Ronnie Harrison, I think, is still there. They had Morgan Burnett 2 years ago. I'm not ready to crown these guys anything until I see them get on the field and play. I think that's just a lot of speculation. There's question marks there. So I think some of this is more the fodder for those of you who have to deal with, in your daily lives, family members, friends, coworkers who happen to be fans of one of these other AFC North teams, and they stick the finger right in your face and they say, your offensive line's going to suck. Your running game's going to suck. Your quarterback is over the hill. Your defense, they haven't replaced these guys. Take a look in the mirror. You're the pot calling the kettle black. Essentially, you got your own question marks there. That's why they still have to play the game. So that's why this stuff really grinds my gears, especially after that Pens loss. I wish I could have found you the Steven Nelson stats. I'll see if I can't find them. I'll tweet them out. Maybe I'll put them on over at Steel City Underground or something like that. I had it not too long ago, and I'm trying to see if I had one more annoying thing. No, it was pretty much just the Cleveland Browns. Just getting under my craw. It's like, again, Steelers were supposedly the worst 11-0 team to start that season, but if the Browns had done that, then everybody would be talking about how they're Super Bowl contenders this season, no matter how the season ended up. We remember how things finish versus how they start, and how you end up is definitely the way people were thinking about it. When you end up turning the ball over 4 times and losing to the Browns, and then the Browns win that playoff game for the first time ever, it's like, then they play the defending Super Bowl champions and lose. I get why everyone's talking them up here. I don't think you should sleep on the Pittsburgh Steelers, however. So those are my annoying pet peeves. Thank you, everyone, for listening and joining me. Yes, I am a little bit losing my voice here. It's tough doing these by myself, but you know what? I wanted to get some quality content, hopefully, out to you, and you appreciate it. I know most of you in the comments usually do. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Share with a friend, too. Let them know that we're out here. I know, man, it gets rough listening to football content all year round, but again, myself and Brian, Zach, this is our deal, man. And people ask me, and they're like, who's your baseball team? And I'm like, I don't really pay attention to baseball. I mean, I guess I could say the Pirates or the Indians or whatever. Remember where I grew up. One's in one league, one's in the other, so kind of follow both, right? Pens is probably the closest thing that I follow next to the Steelers. And I mean, I don't live, breathe, die. They make a trade. It's like sometimes I don't know who the player is. You know what I mean? So I come from a casual fan background with that type of stuff. But here, man, live, breathe, die, eat, sleep. Steelers football is right there with the 4 seasons too. I love pointing out these. I love these signs. The new set, for those of you who are newer here and don't realize, I finally got to put up all these digs a few months ago, and it's like, man, I had this stuff. I was just waiting. I couldn't wait to have some of these things here. So I'd like to point that out. It's definitely winter, spring, summer. We're there. Summer, Memorial Day. We're turning the corner, right? Football is right around the corner. That's the other season. That's the way I feel. Look forward to your comments wherever you may send them. If you happen to be listening somewhere else to an audio version of this programming, please leave us a review. We appreciate it, especially if it's a good one. Usually when somebody gets PO'd, it's like 1 in 7 reviews is actually a good one. But in most of our cases, we've been fortunate, and we very much thank you for your support. My name is Joe Kuzma, and we always close out the show the very same way. And I sincerely mean this every time, that we encourage our viewers and listeners out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.